festival itself was amazing. The energy of people just wanting to dance and enjoy themselves and then going at it with all that they have, it was beautiful.
We were all students starting our 4th year. We all liked going to parties, and the second the Nova tickets came out, they were really cheap. It seemed like a perfect thing to do right before the year started.
Maybe you haven't. They had a giant inflatable Buddha statue that was featured over, you can see how big it was, over all the party goers.
שיר חדש השיר הלך בנבל עשור הזמר הלך עם ישראל, עם ישראל, עם ישראל חי עם ישראל, עם ישראל, עם ישראל חי עם ישראל, עם ישראל, עם ישראל חי עם ישראל, עם ישראל, עם ישראל חי.
Greetings one and all. Super Wednesdays here in the Holy Land, in the holy city of Elon Moreh, right next to my holy yeshiva. We are on the 14th day of the 8th month of the year, the month of Cheshvan, 5786. As always, this class is for the sake of heaven, to remove the divine presence from the exile, to improve ourselves. Even one little step in our times, one little step is a gigantic step of yesteryear. As always, a shout out to our sponsors, Mike and the volunteers 24/7, helping, assisting with the love of the Jewish people 24/7. And of course, the greatest blog, Palm Tree of Deborah. That is one word, Palm Tree of Deborah. Check it out if you have time. If you don't have time, make time. A few funny things from my last class that I have to share with you. One comment asked, why am I connected to a Christian website? I guess the Voice of Judea of Mike, there's also one with the same name from a Christian. I don't know if if you suspect me on that one, maybe you've had a couple of too many drinks. Another funny comment was, when am I making Aliyah? Somebody was asking me, the class was about the dangers facing the Jewry in America and Europe. When am I making Aliyah? So I had to chuckle to myself. Well, actually, I made it 45 years ago. So I don't know. Some people have to really take some Q-tips. I know it's not the safest idea in the world, but you have to clear out your ears, listen up, smell the coffee. Some people are sleeping out there. Okay, let's go. The pictures that we saw before the class began, the video clips, we saw 2 years ago the anniversary, 2 years ago, the massacre of 1,219 Jews. It was the biggest massacre since the days of the Holocaust. We saw at the Nova Festival, we see thousands of young people on the night of Shmini Atzeret, the night called also Simchat Torah, where Jewish people for thousands of years dance around the Torah. The Torah is in the center. It's the center of our life, of our existence. It's our breath. Here, fast forwarding some thousands of years, we have a terrible dancing around Buddha statue in southern Israel at the Nova Festival. We see, fast forwarding the next clip, we see an amazing fixing of this tragedy of Jews dancing around on the same holiday 2 years later, same location, dancing around the Torah scrolls. Amazing. The same time, 6:30, was the attack 2 years ago of the Gazans against the Jewish people. It was at 6:30 a.m. And this year, and also last year, Jews praying, worshiping to God at the highest, the most holiest time, sunrise. Exactly that same time. Maimonides speaks about doing repentance. It has to be the same place and the same circumstances, what we call the same back channel. So this was amazing. Folks, open up your hearts. You can't make up this stuff. 2 years ago, we saw a tremendous desecration of God's name. We saw a desecration of God's name of thousands of young people going to a festival, desecrating one of the most holy days of the year. This is a time where God, so to speak, says to the Jewish people, up until now, we had 7 days of the holiday of Sukkot, the Feast of the Tabernacles, where we relate to the 70 nations, the 70 bulls for the 70 nations. Now, it's just us together, God and the Jewish people. There can be no higher, it's like a wedding day, the top of the tops, the pedestal of times for anyone. And that's what we had. But instead of dancing around the Torah with God, we desecrated this holiday. There was a immodest dress. The leaflets that were handed out for the event, before the event, calling for free love. 3 dots after that one. And instead of dancing around the Torah, they were dancing around Buddha. This reminds us of the sin of the calf, where the Jewish people, 40 days before, received the Torah. 40 days later, on the 17th day of the month of Tammuz, Moses came down with the 2 tablets, Shnei Luchot HaBrit, which was the next level of receiving the Torah, much more high level than 40 days before. Receiving the 2 tablets was a fast forward in spirituality for the Jewish people. And on that day, 17th day of Tammuz, Jewish people began, after being incited by the multitudes, the Erev Rav, they began to dance around the golden calf instead of dancing around the 2 tablets that were coming. So what happens? The Gra, Rabbi Eliyahu from Vilna, he tells us an amazing line. He tells us that he asks a question, why do we celebrate the holiday of Sukkot in the beginning of fall? It's remembering the protection, the divine protection we received via the clouds of glory when we left Egypt. So it should be 6 months before, at the beginning of the spring. And he says an amazing line. he explains that when the Jewish people, after leaving Egypt and meriting these 7 clouds of glory, which gave us not only spiritual but also physical defense against elements, against enemies, when the Jewish people began to dance around the golden calf, the sin of the golden calf, the clouds of glory disappeared. And that's the way it remained till Yom Kippur, which is 80 days later. 80 days later. 80 days later, on Yom Kippur, the day of forgiveness, atonement, God forgave the Jewish people for the sin of dancing around the golden calf. 4 days later, God returned on Sukkot, on the 15th of the month of Tishrei, 4 days after the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. God returned the clouds of glory, Sukkot, to the Jewish people because he forgave us, which means that golden calf, dancing around the golden calf, equals a elimination of the clouds of glory, of that divine protection spiritually and also materially of the Jewish people. Now, when we fix the sin of the calf, we merit once again to receive the clouds of glory that protect the Jewish people. So what happens? This is an amazing line. Fast forwarding from that event 3,336 years ago, 3,336 years ago, that event, we passed the day of Yom Kippur in Israel, the Day of Atonement. 4 days later, we begin the celebration of Sukkot, which is commemorating the clouds of glory, returning to the Jewish people, protection, spiritually and also bodily protection for the Jewish people. But when we returned the next day, it wasn't even a day, 12 hours later, after Sukkot was finished, 12 hours later, we began returning to the sin of the calf. This time it was Buddha. This time it was desecrating the holiday of Sukkot, creating a tremendous desecration of God's name, immodest dress, free love, and the beat goes on. The protection of Israel disappeared. That's the formula here. Amazing. You can't make these things up, folks. Okay. Fast forward, last year, a year ago, some righteous friends of mine organized to have Jews come down to the same spot, the Nova in the southern Israel, near the junction of Re'im, to come down and celebrate, make a tikkun, fixing the sin of the year before at the Nova festival. Amazing. 160 Jews camped out. Okay, this is a big holiday. You know, it's a holiday, should be in your house. People are camping out over there in tents. Amazing. But folks, I merited this year. I didn't know about it last year. I heard about it 2 days before the holiday. One of my kids told me about it. And me and my wife, we signed up, took down our tent. And this year, thank God, 800 Jews showed up at the site of the Nova. At Nova, there were 350 Jews that were murdered at that festival. 350. So 800 people came to pray and to dance around the Torah this time and to keep all the laws of the holiday and to cause a sanctification of God's name and fix this terrible event that happened 2 years ago. So it was such an amazing, I could do a class just on the experience, being with 800 other people, camping out, you're in a tent, and the prayers and praying at the sunrise. Really, really an uplifting experience. At where we spent Simchat Torah, Shmini Atzeret, this was the site, of course, of the Nova Massacre, the Nova Festival, right there. It has since become a memorial site for the victims of October 7th, 2 years ago. There, you have a memorial with pictures, colorful pictures of all those that were murdered, and a short summary of their lives, their interests, their hobbies, getting to know who the people were. It's not just a number, 350. There are people, there are lives behind that number. According to organizers there, who I spoke with, approximately 1,500 people visit the Nova site every day, every single day. Pretty amazing. Now, this brings us to the topic of our class. When we look at memorials, museums, Holocaust museums, memorial days, what is the Torah, what is the Jewish outlook on these concepts? Let's call them new concepts. Holocaust museums, memorials, Memorial Day for the fallen Jewish soldiers in Israel's wars, the Nova Memorial now. If we put on our Torah glasses, let us delve in to the outlook of Torah. Is this the Jewish way to commemorate these massacres? Rav Kook writes, Rabbi Avram Yitzchak Kook writes in his book called Mamre Riyah, he writes the following: in a eulogy for 69 Jews that were massacred in Hebron in 1929, it seems that there is no need to make a eulogy for the destruction of the Jewish community in Hebron. Their memory is engraved within us forever. However, the goal of remembering events must bring to actual plans to rebuild the city of Hebron. In other words, what Rabbi Kook is telling us here, remembering on its own is really superfluous, unnecessary. Only memory which brings, remembrance that brings to action and deeds and a change, that is praiseworthy. Just to remember for the sake of remembering, not the Jewish way. The Slonim rabbi, the rabbi of Slonim, in his classic books, Netivot Shalom, in the book of Numbers, page 190, he asks the question, why do we mourn 3 weeks for the loss of the temple? It goes without saying, we are not mourning what was once and now no longer exists. The Jewish people keep no memories of the past unless it's connected to the present and the future. We mourn for 3 weeks for the temple, for the 2 temples that were destroyed, as a statement, loud and clear. Not only do we not accept for a moment the loss of the temples, furthermore, we are working towards and yearning for its rebuilding. Okay, so we have Rabbi Cook and we have the Rabbi of Slonim that tell us what is Jewish Memorial Day. In 1951, in the Israeli parliament, what's called the Knesset, there was a resolution to create a new holiday for the Jewish people, not only in Israel, but throughout the world. This would be a memorial day for the Holocaust and the uprisings of the various ghettos. This was in 1951. Whatever the reasons were, that resolution did not progress, it did not proceed. And only 8 years later, in 1959, did the Israeli parliament pass a law that on the 27th day of the month of Nisan, which is a week after Passover, there will be a memorial day for the Holocaust and for bravery and strength. During this day, entertainment centers would be closed at night, not during the day, but at night. There would be a siren, a 1-minute siren where people would be requested to stand and stop whatever they were doing in silence, a minute of silence. The flag of the country would be lowered to be placed at half-mast. There would be ceremonies at the Knesset, and of course, Yad Vashem, which is the biggest memorial of the Holocaust. Now, the original, why was this date? We have 365 days of the year. Why did the Israeli parliament pick this day right after Passover? So very interesting that it wasn't really supposed to be at a week after Passover. It was really supposed to be the eve of Passover, the day before Passover, which is the 14th day of the month of Nisan. Why? Because on April 19th, 1943, began the uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto. And Israel had an interest in trying to portray a new type of Jew. He wasn't the Jew of yesteryear, of the exile that went like a sheep to its slaughter. This was a new Jew. So they wanted to combine Holocaust Day and also the day of remembering the uprising of the Warsaw Ghetto. However, because of the fact that the day that the Warsaw Ghetto revolution broke out, that was the eve before Passover. So they understood, the Knesset understood, the parliament understood in Israel, that they could not make the Holocaust Day the eve of Passover. So that therefore was delayed till after Passover. But that was the intention. Now, we have to call a timeout here, very much needed timeout. and put on your seatbelts, because this is really amazing stuff that you can't make up. We're going to take a pause here. The 1959 passing in the Israeli parliament of a new day, Memorial Day for Holocaust, and also for strength and courage, i.e. the uprising of the Warsaw Ghetto. So let's take a stop. Now this is amazing. Of all days to begin the uprising, the 14th, the eve of Passover, before Passover was chosen. This is amazing. Why? Listen closely. The Zohar, the Holy Zohar, writes in the portion of Bishalach, which is in the book of Exodus, on the last verse of the portion, it says, so to speak, that God lifts up his hand, Yad, Yud Dalet, lifts up his hand and swears that for all generations there will be a war against Israel's arch enemy, Amalek. Now, once again, when you swear, you lift up an oath, you have to lift up your hand till this very day. That's how people swear. Then when you're in court, lift up your right hand. So where did they steal this from? Of course, from the Jews. So the Zohar says that of all the year, 365 days, the greatest time, the best time of the entire year to bring down the enemies of the Jewish people, represented by the archenemy Amalek, is the 14th day of Nisan, which is the day before Passover. And he explains, when it says hand, swear, an oath, it also is Yudalit, numerical value of 14. The 14th of Nisan. This is the most apropos time to bring down the enemies of the Jewish people. Now, that is amazing. This is Exodus chapter 17, verse 16. Check it out in the Holy Zohar. Now, the Rokeach in the laws of Passover, he in chapter 271 says similar to the Zohar. Listen to this. This is a very special time of the year to witness the fall of Esav. Esav, okay, the archenemy of Jacob. Esav is Rome. Rome is the Christian world. And he points out, when you look at the name David, in numerical value, in Hebrew of course, it's 14. Once again, the 14th of Nisan. So we have the Zohar and we have the Rokeach that are telling us this amazing information, spiritual information. More so, the Talmud relates that Yeshu was handed over to be killed, on the eve before Passover, which was the 14th of Nisan. This is brought down in Tractate Sanhedrin, page 67, side A. So this is really, really amazing. That is the day. The uprising lasted for 27 days. It was unbelievable. I mean, read some books about the uprising there. It was miraculous. Miraculous uprising. And with that said, and talking about how Israel was trying to present a certain new image, not the image of the old Jew that went like a sheep to slaughter, this is important information to know. In the Warsaw Ghetto, first of all, God willing, without promising, we will do a class or two when we get closer to Passover, just on the uprising of the Warsaw Ghetto. It's really an amazing story. But I'm passing on information that unfortunately most people, most Jews, are ignorant of. In the Warsaw Ghetto, there were 3 giants, Torah giants of the entire generation. Not just in their city, state where they lived, in Warsaw, but in all of Europe. That was, number 1, was Rabbi Shimshon Stockhelmer. Number 2, Rabbi Menachem Zemba. By the way, Rabbi Menachem Zemba, of blessed memory, may God avenge his blood, he had written 10,000 pages of new ideas of the Torah. 10,000 pages of his chidushim, his new angles on the Torah. He was an unbelievable giant. His manners, how he held himself, how he acted to human beings he was amazing. He was the top. After, we have 3rd, Rabbi David Kahana Shapira. These 3 all supported the uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto. Today, there are some voices that are trying to say that Rabbi Menachem Zemba and others did not support the uprising. And we have testimony from many that this is false. Rabbi Zemba says, this, you must not hand yourselves over to the authorities, you must fight. This is a positive commandment to go out to war. This is it. This is a sanctification of God's name. Unfortunately, there was a school of thought, not just back then, but for some hundreds, maybe even more years, that the Jew should just accept the punishment and the pogroms and the inquisitions and the crusades sitting down. That is a whole different discussion. Unfortunately, that still prevails till today. This is amazing. The day that the uprising broke out, then April 19th, 1943, these 3 giants, they called for a tribunal court hearing. There were 3 judges, all these 3 rabbis that I mentioned. They had received word from the Jewish capos that if they wanted to, they had 24 hours to escape. Nobody would touch them, and they could escape away from Europe. They could save themselves. As is the law, when we're talking about laws of life and death, we start with the smallest rabbi there. Not the greatest scholar, but they're all great, of course, but relatively. So they started with Rabbi David Kahana Shapira. And he said, how could we leave our communities? We have to stay here. And both other rabbis both agreed, and they stayed. They stayed, and they supported the uprising. Binyamin Mintz, he was a member, a leader of the group called Poalei Agudat Yisrael, PAI. And in a religious newspaper called Haderech, from the 18th of the month of Iyar, 1944, page 2 in that newspaper. He writes the following. There were many different organizations that participated in the Warsaw Uprising. There were the Bundists, the Jewish Socialists, there were the Jewish Communists, and there were the Zionist factions, though some of the Zionist factions were against the uprising. That they don't tell you. A list, after the ghetto fell, a list of fighters with their affiliation, which group were they affiliated to? The Bundists, the Communists, the Socialists, the Zionists. Every name of fighters that were killed in the uprising, their affiliation, which group they belonged to. However, all names of religious people that participated in the uprising in the ghetto were miraculously erased. Now, there were 3 religious leaders of the uprising, 3 from this Poalei Agudat Yisrael. 3. And as has been true throughout history, the last 80 years, the Zionist movement, unfortunately, have tried to rewrite history and have done a good job of educating generations already on eliminating the participation and the establishment and the success of returning to the land of Israel to the religious people. Okay. So, what's upsetting here? Of course, it goes without saying, as we've mentioned the last 10 minutes, the uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto was a tremendous sanctification of God's name. Religious Jews participated, supported. The 3 top scholars of the generation supported this uprising. Of course, it was a tremendous sanctification of God's name. When someone comes to slay you, get up and slay them first. However, with that said, with this tremendous sanctification of God's name and courage and strength and beauty that they did, it must be said, there was on purpose, there was an agenda here by the secular establishment, Zionist establishment, to portray courage and strength as only on a military level of standing up and fight. In their books, strength, courage does not mean what we saw with tens of thousands of Jews who sacrificed their lives to steal some margarine so they could light Sabbath candles or light the Hanukkah candles, or Jews that risked their lives to steal some flour in order to, when Passover would come, to bake those matzot. Jews that gave up their lives for putting on the tefillin on their hands and their heads. That is in the ethics of our fathers, the Mishnah tells us, who is a warrior? A warrior is a person that is able to overcome their inclinations, overcome their fear. There was tremendous, beautiful self-sacrifice, sanctification of God's name of tens of thousands of Jews for clinging on to the Torah and the commandments. But this was not something that was put on a pedestal by the establishment, the secular establishment. Okay, now, God willing, we're going to call a timeout over here. And don't touch that dial, because we will be back with God's help next week. But we will see. Very interesting. Once again, as I said, if you look at the roots of Israel, coming to the land of Israel, fighting for the land of Israel, establishing communities in the land of Israel, it was the religious people that were behind it. But they were censored over the decades. They've been whited out by the establishment because it goes against their agenda. We will see, God willing, next week, this idea in 1951 and also 8 years later, which was eventually in 1959 was passed to have a Memorial Day. This was not an original idea of the secular establishment. This was a religious idea before 6 years before the Israel Parliament woke up. Okay, don't touch that dial, God willing, next week.